It's my pleasure to introduce our moderator for this morning's panel. Christine, we're delighted to have you here from New York City. Christine Mulkey, Executive Editor of Bon Appetit.
Thank you. Thank you so much. How exciting to be here. Not only do I get to get out of work, I get to wear black opaque tights for the first time this season. Thank you, Portland and Feast and Whole Foods, Travel Oregon. It's been a thrill. I even get to wear boots. I've been coming to Portland for almost a decade to report on restaurants, artisanal food, and agriculture. And every time I've come back, it's sort of like the computing industry where everything is just faster, bigger, stronger. Every 2 years, there's just this incremental leap in innovation and passion, and so I'm so honored to actually get the inside scoop from some of the people who are really making it happen beyond, as I was saying, for wrapping the caramels until 4 a.m. We have David Howitt, who's the president and CEO of Meriwether Group. You all have extensive biographies, but you can see that he's behind several successful brands, including Adidas, Stumptown, Living Harvest, and Burgerville, which I'm a huge fan of. That was one of my first stops. I'm sad that Walla Walla season is ending. We have Edmund LaMacchia, the Global Vice President of Procurement for Whole Foods Market. We have Scott Nelson, who's the Jobs and Economy Policy Advisor to Governor John Kitzhaber, which I'm learning to pronounce, among many other town names today. We have Shelley Gunton, who's the Angel Oregon 2012 Chair. And Chuck Eggert, the president of Pacific Natural Foods, who's been doing this since way before I was born. No, I'm kidding. Only 25 years, people. So we'll start with Scott. Scott, what's the economic contribution of artisan food to the Oregon economy, especially relative to the agricultural commodities in the state?
Well, it is, even if the numbers don't say this is the biggest driver of agriculture in our state, the spirit and the contribution and the spin-off and the overall economic effect make it a critical, if not a primary driver of Oregon agriculture. And so just to step back for 1 minute, our economic development strategy starts with running to our strengths. And in agriculture, we have a real strength. Our geologic and geographic diversity, our obviously our let's call it our hydrological gifts, and the snowpack that forms to deliver that water when we need it during a growing season, and also our natural and built transportation assets. Make this a great place to do agriculture and to do food. And although I have not seen anything where I got a very clear definition of artisan food, and I don't think our state economist has ever taken a crack at that. It is clear that it's that agriculture as a whole, Katie said between 10 and 15%. I somehow calculated it at 15 to 20%. So I'm bullish. I'm bullish here. And 175,000 jobs in production, processing, and support. That makes agriculture overall a very big number. Our state GDP is something around $175 billion. So we're talking $20 billion range. And last year, perhaps the year before, gross wine sales were $330 million, right? To give you another sort of rule of thumb, artisan cheeses did $16 million last year. But despite despite the difference in order of magnitude, there are all sorts of other things that come along with it, including the fact that all of you are sitting here in this room today. And how many of you are from outside of Portland? Right. Okay. So there you go. Oregon's food culture, as anybody at Travel Oregon will tell you, is a primary driver of our tourism industry, and that's an $8.8 billion industry. And our restaurants do another $8 billion in sales. Now, of course, that's all restaurants. right? No matter how much it is that when I'm driving up I-5, I wish at the Woodburn exit, there were like an Andina drive-through. There just isn't. On long cold days in the middle of the legislative session, I do fall prey to the Big Mac attack, even though I wish it were a tuna ni que ceviche bowl or something. But it is a big deal. It's the value add production. It's adding to a resilient food system here, and we want to keep these numbers growing. We're very focused on that, I think in Oregon too, we're focused on a lot of other things to kind of take the next step. And I'll just toss this out on the table, but the governor, my boss, this year and last year has gone through another round of really interesting healthcare reforms here in Oregon. And a big part of that involves doing interventions much further up the stream, and a big part of that could be nutrition. And so the question is, at what point, and I know this of course already happens to some degree, but at what point do we build that really, really robust delivery system so that we are getting nutritious whole foods built in, even as a matter of considering our healthcare public policy. And I said, there are a lot of efforts like that ongoing, but what I'm talking about is the really big levers, federal programs and so on. So, how's that?
Good. So not just good foods in the hospital system, but way, way, way before that.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right.
Not just getting fresh vegetables there. So what are some of the policy challenges that are facing the food community?
Right. So this is where I will kick most of this question to my good friend and savior today, Katie Koba. But I think I'll just say this: that the policy challenges for these kinds of producers, I think, are the same kinds of challenges that large producers face, that small businesses face. There are regulatory issues. There are access to capital issues. There are marketing issues. And there are various ways to help with all these things. I think I will just mention, I think Katie will likely enlighten us further on this. We passed some legislation in the last legislative session to exempt some small producers from some food safety requirements. I think that we all need to be cognizant of the fact that everything I talked about in the first part of my answer, and that success, is potentially subject to some sort of big whoops moment on food safety, for instance. And a huge part of our branding, Katie and I are about to head back on a gubernatorial trade mission to Asia, and one of the things one of our value adds, almost like in high tech where we have good intellectual property protection, one of our value adds around the world is our food safety, right? And so I think that's an inflection point where we need to be very, very careful and cognizant.
So I might just add briefly, sometimes when we're thinking food, we don't think of some of these policy issues, and I'm not going to go into great depth, but I think it's very, very important to keep all this context, whether you're a large producer or a small producer. The first thing you need to grow food is land. And certainly in Oregon, we have a very, very unique land use system where one of our primary goals with that system is to protect agricultural land for agricultural production. One of the unique policy challenges we're starting to face in that, wineries, farm stands, you name it, we want to get people out on the farm. People like to go out to the winery and sit there and enjoy Oregon wine, but what about the person that's farming next door? And if you have consumers coming out into farmland to enjoy and experience the products being grown, at what point in time do you have a conflict which can negatively affect farming? That's a big challenge for us, and it's complex, and there's absolutely no easy answers. The second one that I would throw out besides land, you need water. And we in Oregon, our primary source of water in the summertime is our snowpack. If we're looking at climate change, if we're looking at a reduction in snowpack, how do we continue to provide the water that we need for agricultural production as well as to protect endangered species, for recreational purposes, and for municipal purposes? So another kind of policy thing that I think people don't necessarily jump to when they're talking about foods or artisan foods. And yet, for agriculture as a whole, two very, very critical issues, and ones that I think it's a way that our small food or artisan food industry helps us, because there's perhaps more of a connection with the urbanites to our wineries, to our craft breweries, to our cheeses, and having that connection and letting those people then also engage in telling the story about we need a strong land use system and we need access to water is a new way for agriculture to connect. Clearly on the food safety side, a lot of discussion, both in Oregon and at the national level. A new landmark piece of legislation that Congress passed a little over a year ago dealing with food safety, the Food Safety Modernization Act. It's a whole new set of regulations that are going to come out on producers and how
integration, in my mind, revolve around being integrated in all the various logistic networks into your consumers, whether it be direct into a farmer's market environment or servicing a restaurant or a group of retail outlets, or being prepared to sell into wholesale. If you kind of look at the artesian, sustainable, organic agricultural communities evolution from the 70s through to current days. You see, in the 70s there was a lot of co-op activity where people were trying to, create these infrastructure mechanics that were predicated on people working collectively. A lot of those failed. You've got some great success stories here in Oregon. You've got the Oregon, the organically grown company coming out of Eugene that was originally a co-op. And there's a lot of stories with the food conspiracy in San Francisco, how they, essentially they collapsed because there was too much dependency on the infrastructure being egalitarian and nonprofit, and then you have all the politics of trying to get everybody to cooperate. So what came out of that was a really some sort of competitive for-profit distribution model. Distribution model worked well for a long time, but as organics and some of the specialty agricultural crops became more robust and created volume, all of a sudden that was squeezing out a lot of what was the authentic and smaller scale regional producers. Those smaller scale regional producers had sort of an epiphany back in the 90s, and they brought back some of the community supported agricultural vehicles and created robust farmers markets. Those in themselves are not enough, though, and that's been sort of the next big step that has got to happen in this sort of specialty agriculture community. I believe that what we're seeing is the emergence of a lot of cooperation right now. I'm sorry, collaboration. Change the word. Where people are actually sitting down and doing things like crop planning and saying, okay, how many cucumbers can the Portland marketplace handle in September? You can grow enough cucumbers to support the whole country's pickling demands, but is that really a smart use of agricultural resources? And that's been changing, and it's, we're just sort of seeing the first part of it. So sort of circling back to the first part of the question, the thing that I want to encourage a lot of the artisan and specialty folks to not forget about is that just because the distribution network, sort of that wholesale, terminal market, wholesale broker, long distance trucking thing is it's a little bit gauche within the community of what's local and what's regional. We can't forget that, because without that we don't have the infrastructure we need to continue to grow agriculture on a very small scale. Love the idea of small scale agriculture. I think Whole Foods loves it. We've committed to regional foragers and all of that. We have a woman who's here in the crowd, Denise Braley, who can talk to how intense we work with regional and small scale guys and gals and try and build up their capability. In the end, people have to be able to make a living, and you've got to grow. You've got to grow outside the Portland marketplace. You want to be able to ship into San Francisco, or you want to be able to ship up into Seattle. And to do that, you need to have boxes. You need to have support mechanics for coolers. If you're in the meat industry, you've got to have a processing facility. So how does it grow? It grows in a very integrated, through all of the distribution channels that are available, and you have to be sophisticated. You have to have resources in marketing, business management, some of the, to speak to food safety, just because you're small, you're not going to get away without doing the requirements in a base food safety standpoint. And lastly is there's a new emerging market. I'm an organic heavy revy, but I also believe that there's a social accountability component in food that's not just the people that are working on the farm. It's what's the impact on the environment. That's a much larger scale than just how many pesticides or synthetic fertilizers were used. What's the impact on the amphibian environment, or the salmon safe type of products that we're seeing come out in the marketplace. So indexing those claims and validating those claims and being able to market those claims is like a whole nother sector of getting outreach into the community and creating substantiation on some of the uniqueness in your products. Anyway, I like free association, and I can keep going. So.
Well, you answered a couple of the other questions, so that's great. You're proud. And what scale does a small producer have to be producing on in order to be able to fulfill orders for you? Like if I have my wonderful, heirloom pear farm, how many pears do I have to be able to deliver to you?
It's pretty much wide open. We have a mantra at Whole Foods, which is ask for forgiveness, don't ask for permission. And as a global guy who has a lot of responsibilities, kind of making sure that we're managing things appropriately and meeting our requirements and standards and all that, I don't really love that statement a lot. But as an advocate, as a sort of an artisan, organic, sustainable advocate, I love that. Back in the old days, we sat down and did the math, and we came up with this number of, an invoice has got to be worth $50 or it's not worth processing. Well, the way that we got around that was, it's just an average number. So, if you've got something really meaningful and you can create the relationship with the person who's going to sell it, we'll buy, a very, very small quantity of product. There's so much richness into the buy-sell relationship. I'm on a tangent. I forgot one thing earlier. The whole perishable world is predicated on supply and demand. And when we work collaboratively and we can manage that supply and demand, we can ultimately manage return to the grower. We can create a win-win environment where it's the grower wins, the retailer wins, the consumer wins. And we don't have to be a victim of the marketplace telling us what the price is. And I think that's really important when you start talking about how small is what will work for Whole Foods Market. It's like what works for Whole Foods Market is what can be meaningfully marketed. And what we can get from the supplier at a good price, we can give to the consumer at a good price, and the consumer can enjoy.
Great. And what's the appeal of Portland-made food for America at this moment?
Specialization. I mean, the food truck environment is incredible because people, you can go get like the best hamburger in the world with the appropriate ingredients for that particular time of the year. You talked about Walla Walla onions. I mean, there's the person in the food truck is the expert on the product that they're putting forward. I would say Portland's a very mature locavore market, one of the most mature locavore markets that I get to see, and I see a lot of markets. And so I think that's another aspect of what's happening here is that people are learning how to tell the story about where the food comes from, what the richness of the food history is, so much better than is being done in other places. I mean, we as Whole Foods Market have sent legions of people here to study.
That's great. Thank you. Shelley, can you please clarify the difference between angel and venture capital funds?
Sure, yes. So just to put it in context, if you're a startup food company in town, in the state, typically you start your business with some of your own money, then you go out, get a little bit of friends and family money, then you probably need a little bit more money. The banks won't look at you typically, so you then go out and approach the angel investor market. And angel investors are typically individuals who are making their own personal investments. They're called accredited investors, which is a real term that has regulations around it. And they're investing largely based upon a set of criteria that they individually have put together. There are also some funds, like the Angel Oregon is a collective of investors. There's the Oregon Angel Fund. But they invest typically in smaller amounts. So they may come in for anything as low as $5,000 and put it into a pool of funds to invest in a startup, all the way up to, say, 100 or even 250,000, but those are more the exceptions than the rule, because then you start moving into either the larger funds or you're moving into the venture capital world. And venture capital is, it's professional investors. These are businesses that's what they do, that's their living, as opposed to angels who often have real jobs and are doing this more because they're passionate about the opportunities in small businesses and see a real upside potentially as well, but may just feel that there really is an opportunity that's beyond just the investment. So when you get into the VCs, they're looking for a return. Bottom line is that they're going to put in more money. They're going to typically take more of the company in return, and they're looking for that exit that is anywhere from 3 years to 10 years, where they want to be able to flip it and get their money out of the business. So very different kind of perspectives. And I think in our local environment here, what's interesting is I probably see maybe 2 to 3 small-scale artisan food manufacturers every month, where I sit down and spend time trying to help them navigate the waters of getting their business up and running. And access to capital is probably one of the biggest hurdles that they run into. It is very hard to raise money as a small startup in the food business. And that's in big contrast, to a large extent, to what we're doing in the technology world. We are very much a tech-centric investor community right now, and I have angel investments in tech, so it's not that I don't invest in tech, but I'm passionate about what the food industry represents to the state and to Portland, and I think we can do so much more to support those companies with some additional infrastructure and more access to capital.
Great. And David, do you have anything to add to that differentiation?
No, I would largely agree with Shelley and add on to it that kind of post venture capital, you then move into the realm of private equity, and private equity is a different animal. And I see it as sort of Charles Dickens' A Tale of Two Cities. It's the best of times, it's the worst of times. It's definitely the worst of times if you're an early stage company, if you're between sort of 0 and let's call it 20 million in revenue, and you're pre-EBITDA. It's difficult. It's really hard to find capital, and on the equity side, you're going to give up a lot to bring money in, and you should go in kind of eyes wide open and make sure you have the right advisors around you helping you through that process. Having said that, if you toggle over to sort of that plus 20 million and let's call it 2 million of EBITDA and growing with an iconic brand and true sort of authentic DNA, it's a good place to be. There's a lot of money chasing very few companies, and they're willing to invest in ways that haven't historically always been the case. They'll make minority investments. They'll pay a very high multiple for valuation purposes. They won't carry all of the necessary sort of historic bells and whistles that you might see in a venture investment. So if you're approaching that place in your business and growing through it, you have a lot of options.
Cool. And is Ipada a new neighborhood?
Yeah.
East of.
East of Burnside Interstate.
Should I invest
we'll
there?
Simplify that.
Okay.
If you're profitable, if you're making money. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Cool. And Shelley, what are some of the resources and support networks available for early stage entrepreneurs?
Sure. There's some generally available early stage company support networks, whether it's the Oregon Entrepreneurs Network, the universities. Many of the universities have programs, for example, around capstones that you can come in, and if you have a small business that you're trying to grow, you can go to a university and have their students help you. There's the Portland Development Commission, there's Business Oregon, there's those opportunities in general. For food companies, there's the Food Innovation Center, which is an amazing facility. There's the Northwest Food Processors Association, again, a great group to be associated with. But again, where the whole is largely, from what I see with so many of these startups, is around the access to capital, the mentoring and advising. Again, I look at what's going on in the tech sector, and we have 3 different incubators in town that support tech companies. We have a very well-defined infrastructure with mentoring, with many more angel investors who are very active in tech. We don't have that same infrastructure around food and other consumer products, for that matter. So a huge opportunity is something that I'm actually working on to try and build out here to bring an additional resource to Portland.
That's great. And what factors are people looking for in order to invest? And that can be for both of you.
Sure. I think what we're seeing in the market from investors is they want to see a blend of what we call sort of left brain and right brain in a business. They want to see the right brain attributes of a company that is truly authentic, meaning the company was birthed from a founder who had a vision about creating something new in the world that would improve the way that consumers ate or consumed food or interacted with food in some way. And I think we're fortunate in this room right now. I just want to pause for a second to say we have some real leaders that exemplify that. I mean, this beautiful, intelligent woman over here who happens to be my wife, Heather Howitt, who is the founder of Oregon Chai, and I was there to kind of witness that. And that came from a real organic place and a desire on her part to provide a new way that people can interact with tea in the world. Chuck and his company at Pacific Foods, not only innovation around the product, but around the packaging and the delivery system, shelf stability, and the various environmental benefits that come with that. I mean, we're drinking Stumptown coffee here, and it's very Portland, right? I mean, we wouldn't just put anything in that coffee. People demand the best, and Stumptown has a real allegiance to how they source their green coffee, to their culture and their office, to the way that they interact with the people who serve their coffee in terms of training them so that they really bring the true benefits of that bean to bear. Taste bud bagels. I mean, everything we are sort of enjoying and doing here speak to that right side of the brain around authenticity, around commitment to quality, around creating an aspirational brand, on delivering on the promise to the consumer, so that when you drink a cup of Stumptown, for that moment, even if you're not realizing it consciously, you're tapping into an experience. You're participating in that promise in the way that they source their coffee and roast it and treat their employees. It's all there. Having said that, it's equally important to move over to the left side and to make sure that your business isn't just built around the brand and the aspirations. You have to have a margin. You have to have a supply chain. You need to have systems. You need to be able to approach running a business. Your alarm clock needs to go off in the morning. You need to balance the checkbook. And you need to be able to bring your product to market in a way that isn't only sustainable in terms of the environment and the social, but sustainable from a P&L perspective. Otherwise, it's not going to go anywhere. It's not going to matter. So weaving those two things together is what drives value. And when an investor is able to see a business that's run by a founder or a management team where there's a healthy balance between the left and right, you've grown something special, and you're probably going to do pretty well.
And can an individual create that, or do you think that the visionary also needs a strong business partner?
I think typically speaking, we find that founders tend to be more right brain focused.
You don't have to be diplomatic.
Typically, but many of them are self-aware enough to recognize that and to surround themselves with very smart people who balance them and who can assist them on creating that left side, but in a way that acknowledges and respects the right side. And a comment I want to make here is I think there is this false belief in the market, often from founders and business owners, that if I bring in an investment partner, a venture capital firm or a private equity firm, I'm selling out. And Portland has this sort of perverse love of talking on one hand about how we can't grow jobs and we can't grow businesses and there's no capital. And on the other hand, as soon as a company is successful in bringing capital in, they've sold out. They're not cool. They're not authentic. I find that frustrating. And what I'll say
sounds kind of French.
Yeah,
actually.
well, true that. So what I'll say is it's not true. I mean, we're big believers in the power of and. The world is not made up of the tyranny of or. You can have both. And so in the case of Stumptown, the founder was exceedingly clear about his desire to maintain the brand integrity, the culture, their commitment to Portland, their desire to serve more Stumptown in more places. And he knew that a strong financial partner would allow him to do that. And he was able to bring in that capital and keep all of those values and belief systems firmly in place and grow it.
Right.
I think that founders can recognize the need to have that balance, and then you can go into the market and find the right partner and grow your business in a heart-centered way that also makes you a lot of money and allows you to hire more people.
Right. Your $23 million into Stumptown will get you a lot of fixed gear bicycle parking. They do have nice motorcycle parking also at the new 37,000 square foot space that they just opened. Shelley, what are some unrealistic expectations that young entrepreneurs have when they're looking for investors? I make these really great chocolates, so can I please have $2 million?
Right.
There's bacon in them.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And a bird on it.
Then you get a check.
Bacon in it, bird on it.
There you go. I think the biggest thing is, first of all, it's kind of underestimating how much time it's going to take to find the money and to nail down the deal. And then the problem that we run into is that, of course, everybody assumes that you're going to love their product. And that chocolate with bacon in it, every investor is going to want to write a check because it's really the best chocolate with bacon in it. But not every investor, again, back to David's comment, if you haven't put that combination of the left and right brain together, and if you're not prepared with your business plan, and if you don't know how to pitch to investors, that's one of the biggest things we run into. Probably heard 500 pitches, and maybe 10% of them are really good investor pitches, and they're different from customer pitches. There's a big difference. So there's that preparation and really understanding that going after money is a big job. It takes time, it takes preparation, you need to know your audience, who you're pitching to, and you need to have all your ducks in a row in terms of that left and right brain process, and really practice. It's practice to get ready for it.
Great. And David, can you speak to some of the alternative opportunities for food investment? Technology, healthcare, things like that.
Yeah, I think when we talk about food and we talk about beverage, it's easy to sort of micro-focus that down into artisanal and into, you know, the brands that we've come to know and love. But I mean, one of Maslow's hierarchy of needs is everyone's got to eat. And so at the end of the day, food as an investment is probably a pretty good thesis, given you can pretty much count on the fact that people are going to eat. And so when we look at food, we look beyond just what's going to be the next greatest selling product at Whole Foods, and also look at innovation around food delivery systems, around ways that food is transported around the country, around new growing systems and innovation. There's an interesting company in Atlanta called Podponics that's learning how to grow food, basically sort of hydroponic growing in very small spots in a very sort of maximized way organically. So in a world in which not everyone lives in Oregon, where there's a lot of rain and a lot of rich soil and land, these kinds of things are interesting. So technology, delivery systems, food in hospitals, food in schools, food in other forms of the military, where folks are looking at newer and better ways to kind of provide nutrition. I think we're seeing innovation in those areas. We haven't made any personal investments there, and we're not working with any companies in that area, but we certainly are seeing it.
It's very interesting. Great. So Chuck, you've done it. So we want to know your secrets. What are some of the challenges that you faced during the evolution of Pacific Natural Foods?
Well, I think to put some context to it is we did it because we didn't know we couldn't, which is the fundamental rule of most of this. But to give the people in the audience a little bit of context is, we're an Oregon company, and we're a family-owned company, and that's our plan and what we plan to go forward with. And when we started the company in 1987, so it's been 25 years, we had 10 employees, we were making tofu, and we sold about 80,000 pounds of food that first year. This year, by 12/31, we'll ship over 300 million pounds of food out of the state of Oregon that's sustainable and organically grown. And when you kind of wake up one day and realize it's kind of an involved process. But back to the context is we have 350 to 375 people working in our plant in Tualatin, about 1 million square feet. We have about 50 people working on at our meat processing facility. We have another 65, 75 people working at the farms that we directly control. So we have about 500 employees literally working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. And all of them are, everyone in our company has the same benefits I have. Everybody has above, the wage that you need to sustain yourself on, and it can be done. And I think to give some context, when we run chicken broth, for every batch of chicken broth that we run, we need 45,000 chickens. And those of you that know us, we do a lot of chicken broth. And the biggest issue we've had working in the state of Oregon, because we will not buy anything that we can't buy locally. So we will not source things out of the country. The only things we get out of the country are vanilla, pepper, spices, things that are not available in the United States. And more importantly, we'll try to get them in Oregon. I think of that total amount of product that we produce, somewhere around 70% of it comes from Oregon. And we do that very intentionally because we tend to be a little obsessive compulsive about where our ingredients come from. And one of our issues, we couldn't get organic milk in the 90s. We were a manufacturer, and most of the milk was going to retail, so we started our own dairies. And now we have 4 organic dairies. They're Organic Valley dairies. They're all animal welfare approved dairies, the largest dairies in the world that are animal welfare approved. And we use about 1.5 million pounds of milk a week right now, and are probably we're the single biggest user of organic milk in the state, other than retail, for manufacturing, and I think we're second or third in the country. And we can tell you not only where that milk came from, but what the cow ate, when they ate it, who the farmer was, and and actually the ground it was grown on. And we face the same issue with poultry, is that the state of Oregon lost, no offense, Katie, their poultry industry. And so we actually have the only USDA-approved poultry processing plant in the state of Oregon. But that took us about 2 years to do with the USDA. Then the problem became there's nobody growing chickens. So we started growing our own poultry, started growing our own turkeys, and we actually opened a hatchery in Tangent that had been closed for a number of years. The guys had turned out the lights and shut the door, and we went back, and it took us 2 years to get them back open again, and now we're actually hatching all our own eggs in Oregon. So we control the chick from the moment it's actually laid. The only problem with that is that we have to get eggs from Arkansas. So once a week, we get 10,000 eggs, kind of a hostage exchange down by the airport. And they go to Tangent, and through some of the work that Oregon State's doing, we met a young lady who is now putting together a breeder program for us. So within about 2 years, we'll be hatching all of our own eggs because we also want to control the heirloom part of it. And I think so many times what a producer has to do is go back and recreate the infrastructure. And we have you have to take the time to get the egg guy going again. You have to work with the dairies to say, no, we don't want it that way. This is the way we want it. And I think that's where so many times when people are starting out, we do plant selection and breeding selection for plants and testing different ways to do farm things so that we can go to people and say, no, you can do it this way. You can make money. And we have a conventional egg or a broiler guy who has his chick density on the farm 1/10 of what he was doing for Foster Farms, and he's making twice as much money. Mm-hmm. And there's kind of this urban myth that these things can't be done. Well, they can be done. You just can't, spend most of your time thinking about it. You actually have to go do it. And we've been fortunate that, we've been in the state of Oregon because we live here, and we're fortunate that we can run a business that can help people. And the 500 people we have, when you push that back to the farm level in Oregon, it's a huge number. And my comment many times has been there isn't a lack of young farmers. There's a lack of access for young farmers to farm. And a vibrant farm economy for us, for everyone, helps. We'll tell anybody anything we're doing at the farm level because if we have a vibrant farm economy, it helps us with our sourcing. And so stumbling into the natural and organic field 28 years ago was a fairly smart decision.
Well, it sounds like you created your own challenges, but
Yeah.
in a really
I'm a muddler too.
in a really productive way. So what advice would you give beginning food business entrepreneurs? What do you wish that you'd done differently?
Well, I think a little bit an extension of what's already been said is that so many times people, you start looking at something and you convince yourself you're really clever. That you have the best Mediterranean Thai curry lemongrass soup that was ever developed in the world. And I think what we find is that so many times things are so overcomplicated, and every time you add an ingredient to something, you eliminate somebody from liking your product. And so starting with classic products is, it's just hard to go wrong. You can always add the things you like later, but when we do product development, what we always look at is what does the person that's going to use it expect, not what do we like. But we tend to make pantry items too, so we won't put anything in it unless it has an absolute need. We'll let people do it themselves. And so people call us up and say, well, I have my uncle's barbecue recipe, and it's the best one ever made. And I go, yeah, well, along with 300,000 other barbecue recipes. And so we tend to encourage people to simplify their thought process from the product development side.
Great. Well, this is all fascinating. I'd like to open up the questions to you and see what you'd like to know from these wonderful people. Don't be shy. Keep it clean. Do we have any questions?
Someone's got to have a question.
Okay.
It's just a personal question. Shocking about that. My husband is a turkey inseminator.
Oh,
Any positions in that?
Wow.
I know, and I'm probably the only person in the room that understands what you're talking about.
Can we get
Maybe.
a demonstration?
I think I got it.
Yeah, no, well, Katie would.
We raised turkeys for eggs in Israel.
Uh-huh.
So we did the process of producing the fertile eggs and had, highest fertility rate. And
Well, and that's the way you do it. If you have, yeah, no, we should get his name.
Please.
Edmund can talk a little bit about what you were talking about supply chain and distribution logistics and all of those challenges. If you could elaborate a little bit on what specifically the barriers are for regional scale distribution. So working with those smaller, whether it's producers or specialty or feed or whatever, but the real challenges and barriers to regional scale distribution.
Well, first and foremost, it's reasonable trucking. Being able to book a truck to carry a partial load or half a load from point A to point B. A lot of your specialty producers in a regional area. So, what's a great example? I mean, I think some of the best pears grown in the world are grown in Medford, Oregon. The Bear Creek Camise pear is my personal favorite pear, but getting it down into, say, San Francisco, let alone getting it down into Austin, Texas, is almost impossible. Getting it up to Seattle is difficult enough. So sort of starting with, that's a great pear area. Bear Creek's a fairly large organization, part of the Harry and David's niche. But if you're an independent orchard guy doing a Camise pears in that area and you want to compete, the most lucrative market for you to come into would be Portland. And getting a truck from Medford to Portland cost you as much money as it would to get a truck from Seattle to San Diego. So I would say first and foremost it's trucking. I think then, there's issues around packaging. I go way back to the early days of organics, and we were trying to put cauliflower in lettuce boxes. And we thought we were the greatest thing in the world. Leave the jackets on and pack them in the lettuce boxes. It's better for the cauliflower's nutritional value, and you're not using all that plastic. And it didn't work. When we put cauliflower in cauliflower boxes and vacuum cooled it and put the cellophane on it, we started selling a ton of organic cauliflower. So you can't overstate the importance of the appropriate packaging for the commodity you're growing. And then I'm big on crop planning, and you have to know how many boxes you have to sell, and you have to be reasonably responsible on delivering that commitment, whether it's chickens for broth or whether it's cucumbers for pickling.
Great. Turkey.
I know I already asked. This is a good question. So I have a question about Whole Foods. I was just in a Whole Foods in Omaha last week, and so how different is the offering throughout the system? If you walk into a Whole Foods here, you expect the same thing as a Whole Foods in Seattle or Portland. It's not a Macy's, it's a Whole Foods. So how do you deal with that?
It's actually maddening. We have probably the most. I don't know. We probably have the item list that doesn't make sense from a most practical business standpoints. The offerings in Omaha probably are going to be about 65 to 70% different than the offerings in Portland.
Wow. In terms of perishables or?
I would say that goes across the whole store. I mean, you got to remember Whole Foods Market, perimeter of our store, over 50% of our sales, probably knocking close to 60% of our sales. And each of those teams is going to have a dramatically different product mix. Every store will have Chuck's broth, but not every store will have Camise pears from Bear Creek.
Interesting. We have the lady in black on the other side. There. No, I'm looking at you.
Edmund, could you talk about the local producer loan program for Whole Foods?
Yeah, it's an excellent program. We entered into that program because we were seeing the need for producers to have access to capital. I think one of the things we've learned in doing this program, we've also got an equity program that we work with, is that, you know, when you start giving people money, there's expectations, you know, and we're not always everybody's first choice for coming to get money because we have expectations around that. And to sort of like, how do people get started in the business? Yeah, you have to be willing to use the left side of the brain. I love the local loan producer program. For us, you know, I think there's a lot of run room on it to be developed further. One of the big stumbling blocks, and I gave this presentation to our local foragers a few months back, is people have not yet grasped the importance of crop planning. With that kind of sort of organized approach to, you know, what do I want to create, how do I want to create it, I think the missing link in sort of execution of our local loan program is on the perishable side, on the produce side in particularly. A lot of opportunities for us to develop more supply. The money's available. You know, we haven't exhausted our resources on that at all. And but it's like going to the bank for a loan. While it's a lower interest loan, it's the same sort of regimentation because we're giving away a lot of money. So we have to have, you know, sort of the supporting documents kind of validate the investment.
How much is a typical loan?
Well, we originally thought they would be in the, you know, $5,000 to $10,000 range, but they've actually been a little bit more significant than that. And
how
I
big-
can't give you an exact number. 25,000. Yeah.
Thank you. And how big is the fund?
$10 million.
Okay, everybody. A woman standing, please.
Hi, Robin Johnson, Partners for Hunger-Free Oregon. And so I just wanted to highlight something. I'm really excited that Chuck Hetter is on the panel and to highlight a great public-private partnership that happened here in Oregon. So a couple years ago, not to go on for too long, the federal government revised the food package for the WIC program. So for those of you who are not familiar with WIC, it's a public health nutrition program that supports low-income families with newborn children and supports mothers. And so one thing that they were looking at is that there wasn't a soy milk that met the federal guidelines, and so they worked with Pacific Foods to reformulate the soy milk with one nutrient. So our state director of WIC is sitting right here, which is why I keep looking. I just want to say it right. I want to make Sue proud. So they reformulated the soy milk so it included another nutrient or two, so it met the USDA guidelines. And so then that product, an Oregon product, clearly made by a great company, was available to a whole market of folks, of low-income folks at high risk of going hungry who may need milk alternatives. And so that's just something that has always sort of tickled and touched my heart. And I just wanted to say publicly thank you for just your company being so open to working with state agencies and advocates on that issue. And I think that there's a little bit of a lesson there. So that as the state or the WIC program approached you, to just being open and saying, yeah, we can do this so that this program works to meet the nutritional needs of the program and serve lots more families. So thanks for that.
Well, that's something we're particularly proud of because actually it's now approved in all 50 states, or it's authorized in all 50 states. It hasn't quite gotten there yet. And I think we've done a lot of work with the food bank for 25 years. And all of our test runs go to the food bank. All of our dated product goes to the food bank. We run items specifically for the food bank. And our fundamental company philosophy is that if we have the ability to run something that helps someone, we should. And so, but the WIC thing is dear to our heart because it meets a basic need.
Very much so, and just understanding the economic power of the funds from federally funded nutrition programs. And my last bit is we know that for every dollar spent in the SNAP program, it generates about $1.79 in economic activity. And so that's just something. So thinking about the WIC income, thinking about the SNAP income, it's just one of those sort of win-win situations. And so I want to thank you for the work that you've done with our state programs.
Great. We have time for one more question, and then I need a bagel. Go ahead.
You'll be surprised at my question. I'm Teresa O'Neill with Travel Oregon. I oversee the international marketing efforts. So we love bringing Oregon products overseas with us and featuring our wines and our cheeses, and they all want to be able to buy it over there as well. which is a great thing, but we know it's a challenge to provide for Oregonians, let alone Germans. That being said, I'm wondering, Chuck, what your thought is on the export strategy, because the Obama administration has such a significant commitment to increasing exports and has put funding behind it with SBA as well. So I'm wondering about your comments regarding that.
Well, we sell a little bit offshore, a lot to Israel, actually, is one of our biggest customers. We have not really pursued that. Primarily, we've been very busy with what we've been doing here. And I think we have in the next number of months, we're coming up with meat products that will come out, diced meat, pre-cooked diced meats that have a higher unit value than other. And I think it's a way for us to get some of these Oregon products out there. And especially the European Union just changed the regulations so that the organic standards are now uniform amongst the European countries, which is ironic because the Americans think, oh, this is great. They're using our standards, and the Europeans are going, this is great. Now they can buy our product. So, it's kind of one of those things. But Oregon has a very unique opportunity, I think, but they have to be selling processed products.
And just a quick plug, the SBA notion that was referred to is a program called the Sept program, and it is designed to get small businesses access to foreign markets. So if any of you are interested.
And there's also federal funding specifically for food and agricultural products as well through USDA Market Access Program. And so there are resources in a number of places if you're interested in looking at export markets.
Great. Well, that's it for today. Thank you so much, and thank you so much to our incredible panelists. Thank you.